Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. I'll be in your company for the next hour. We want to go to our lead interview for today, and that is Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane has condemned what he calls a serious breach of diplomatic protocols after officials from the Israeli embassy visited provincial institutions, including hospitals and a university, without the knowledge or consent of the provincial government. Mabuyane says the unauthorized engagements, reportedly facilitated by the AbaThembu King Buyelekhaya Dalindyebo, undermine South Africa's constitutional diplomatic process and sovereignty, and has ordered an investigation into how donations were accepted outside official channels. Now, we have to cast our mind to last month when the king visited Israel and caused an outcry with many people, given South Africa's diplomatic stance with Israel. Now, we also have to remember that Parliament, before the Government of National Unity, before the 7th administration, had taken a resolution, and it has yet to be passed by the National Assembly, to downgrade the Israeli embassy or even have the ambassador removed from the country. So where do we stand in terms of this? Let me welcome the Eastern Cape Premier's spokesperson, Sonwabo Mbananga. Sonwabo, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good greetings to your viewers and to yourself.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Sonwabo, I'm just going to read the statement from the Premier. Quote unquote, the conduct of foreign relations is a constitutional competency vested in the national sphere of government. Accordingly, any engagement between foreign diplomatic missions and organs of state must occur through national and provincial, through established diplomatic channels, I beg your pardon, and in line with national protocols in close coordination with both national and provincial authorities. So, if I'm correct in this, and that's why it's good that we have you on, Sonwabo, if the Israeli ambassador or anyone from the embassy was visiting the Eastern Cape, the first individual that had to know about it had to be the office of the Premier of the Eastern Cape, and that, of course, would be Premier Oscar Mabuyane.
Well, that is indeed true for us. Look, as the statement is outlining, the competence to coordinate and conduct foreign relations between countries and on behalf of South Africa in this instance, as it is described in the country's constitution, it is the national executive, national government through the national executive, and as it is delegated to the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. So at that's where it would have to start under normal circumstances. We would then liaise because in the office of the Premier, we have a directorate for international affairs or international relations, which conducts and coordinates all the visits by diplomats to the province. Just recently, the Premier received diplomats from the People's Republic of China, and then thereafter met with the diplomats from the United States of America. So such relations are conducted, relations insofar as in this instance, wanting to come into the province to assist with the developmental projects in the province. You would have to get also an appreciation from the provincial government perspective, because we would be the custodians of what is the state of the province in essence, where would the pressure points be, and where in earnest we do require indeed assistance. But all of this has to happen within the framework of our constitution as a constitutional a republic, within the framework of our laws, and within, of course, established protocols in the context of conducting the diplomatic relations between people to people. So quite indeed, there was an anomaly in this instance, and several, as we continue to learn, that the officials of the Israeli embassy have indeed also reached out to other parts of the province. Perhaps I should allow you to ask your next question.
Yeah, because this is quite important. So, and I'm going to get to the sort of ANC part of this because Oscar Mabuyane is a member of the African National Congress, and hence that's the reason, Sonwabo, we've asked you to give us more time because there's so much to break with regards to this because there's also sort of ANC stance on Israel. So my understanding is, and if you look at the constitution, before even any country, and this is not just on Israel, any country or diplomats are coming through to a province, there has to be some sort of vetting process. So obviously, before the donation, in this case, this is what we are seeing right now, any donation or investment that is going to be done, the provincial departments need to sit down with those diplomats and say, okay, this is what's going to happen, and some sort of an agreement comes with regards to that. Am I correct in stating that?
You're quite correct. This work, by the time it arrives at the level of the premier, would have been thrashed out by officials, firstly in the department vis-a-vis officials of the foreign country that we are engaging with, together, of course, with our officials, as I've alluded earlier, that the office of the premier has a component in it that deals with international relations or matters related. And also touching on that, the Eastern Cape has significant and various multilateral and bilateral relations and agreements with various state or provincial governments from across the world. To count perhaps one at the top of my head would be Lower Saxony in Germany.
Sure.
Perhaps another would be the province of Guangdong in China. These are places where, in fact, we derived significant investment footprint. Similarly, Israel also has a significant footprint in South Africa, also in the Eastern Cape. So, firstly, we want to extricate this issue from being a anti-Israel or ANC position because we do not speak on that platform. We are the provincial government. We have a responsibility to discharge our responsibilities as per the dictates of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. So that is where our interest in the matter starts and ends. And to that end, you'll also recall that what we have also, all of us, since learned was that there were donations that were made, not only access to public institutions, perhaps in the province, but also donations, implements towards our public healthcare system. What the premier has directed is that the MEC for Health in the province must conduct an investigation, find out, number one, how did officials, for an example, of the two medical institutions attend a meeting at the Royal Court. The second part is how then was access granted to this visiting delegation together with His Majesty to these two public institutions, including the University of Walter Sisulu. So that report will then guide, the input that the premier is on an ongoing basis making to national government, because there has to be clarity around this issue. As per the Constitution, conduct of foreign relations is not an informal or a cultural exchange exercise. It is deliberately located in the Constitution under the ambit of the executive for a reason, because these are serious matters. This is where also the posture of a country would be defined, if you like, in terms of from the prerogative of the national executive at that level of having the prerogative then to determine what that posture will look like, and for the country to then fall in line, if you like, with that posture. So hence you will appreciate the sensitivity and the seriousness of the conduct of foreign relations, although we do not speak
So now
for that space.
I have to stop you because we have to go to a break. But I am just to keep in mind before we head to the break and we come back. You've mentioned the sort of ANC stance, and I am going to bring that in, given, of course, that the Eastern Cape, as we speak right now, is not a government of provincial unity, and it's still a government under the African National Congress. So my conversation with Sonwabo Mbananga continues after the break. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to News in Focus. I'm in conversation with the Premier spokesperson from the Eastern Cape, Sonwabo Mbananga. Sonwabo, again, thank you so much for staying with us. So, Sonwabo, again, I guess everyone knows that Oscar Mabuyane is a member of the African National Congress. And the African National Congress, of course, has a pro-Palestinian stance. I mean, they've obviously condemned Israel's occupation of Palestine, not just in Gaza, but also in the occupied West Bank. We've seen that South Africa, under the ANC government, and of course a lot has changed then in December 2023, took Israel to the International Court of Justice. Now, this is where, of course, the public are scratching their heads and asking, how could Israel enter the Eastern Cape, given that it is a province run by the ANC, and, of course, conducting business there, whether it's a donation, whether it's investment. So talk to us about that. What we want to know, and I think it's important for the viewers to know, is where does the ANC sort of policy within its constitution come in, especially when it comes to any diplomat that is from Israel?
Look, for us, I understand the temptation to want to draw perhaps the African National Congress into the discussion. They do have their own representation. I wouldn't want to then overstep my space, but I can concede, yes, that Premier Mabuyane serves at the behest and of the African National Congress in the province, and that's where I will end. But to come back to what to us is the central issue, the constitutionalism around it, the respect for sovereignty around it, because at the heart of it, Premier Mabuyane must account for the discharge of programs, public programs, must account for the integrity of these programs, must also account for the integrity of public institutions. Meaning, in other words, what those public institutions are doing insofar as to deliver services and obviously to impact the residents, the people of the Eastern Cape. And we must be able to account at the end of the day. So you can't then expect a government to account when in fact it has been circumvented in a manner in which that is untoward. I can't overstate this, the seriousness of the undermining of the South African sovereignty by the officials of the Israeli embassy by bypassing set protocols for the conducting of foreign relations with other countries and conducting their own determined program of foreign relations, making their own determinations of who needs assistance where, without having the appreciation. Because I can tell you now that as much as it is encouraged, even within the constitution, for traditional leaders to play their role in so far as playing the ambassadorial role of within the cultural exchange context, if you like. But traditional leaders are not by law required to account for anything that may happen in terms of these programs that officials of the Israeli embassy delivered, for instance, donations to, or even the programs around the catchment and of water. We also want to understand this because we are pro-development. Contrary to what the communique out of the Israeli embassy website is suggesting, there is no anti-Israeli stance. South Africa has, as far as I know, diplomatic relations in place with the state of Israel. We are heavily mutually involved in commerce. There is no policy that says that we, as government, that, as you say, that is run or discharged by the African National Congress that says that we must be opposed to anything that comes from Israel, because Israel is already entrenched in the economy of South Africa and in the Eastern Cape. They are already involved in agriculture with our farmers. They are already entrenched in our food production pipeline. They are involved in the milk sector. They are also their producers, manufacturers are selling various of their products freely and openly at all our retail and high-end retail and major retail stores in the country. So that argument does not arise. What we have to insist on, though, is the respect for the Constitution of the Republic by the officials of the Embassy of Israel to go through proper protocols and channels to conduct their collaborative or developmental programs that they envisage to advance in the province. In fact, we are pro-development, even at the 11th
Sonwabo.
hour.
Sonwabo, sorry.
Yes.
I have to come in another question, but before I just want to make a comment. So I think both you and I know, and I know you're not a foreign international expert, so I'm not gonna point that question to you because the United Nations and various other institutions, including two Israeli organizations, have declared what Israel is doing in Gaza is a genocide. But look, that's not why I'm gonna ask what I'm gonna ask you, because obviously Israel's investment here, there are critics of the government right now that say that South Africa needs to cut complete ties with Israel. And of course, South Africa still trades with Israel through, of course, coal distribution in that regard. But that's obviously not a discussion where we're talking about. It's just a comment, what I wanted to add there. So now, but the question that I do want to ask you. So my understanding is that anyone who visits public hospitals or public institutions within the Eastern Cape needs to go through an MEC's office. Now, this is an article I got from IOL, which says two chief executive officers at the hospital in the Eastern Cape told the provincial government that, quote unquote, we accepted Israel's donation because we did not want to be seen as defying the AbaThembu King. My understanding is that the Eastern Cape government supersedes that of a traditional leader. Am I right in saying that? Because if we were to take that quote, it seems very different to that of taking orders from the provincial government.
Look, let me first go back to the genesis of that comment or that quote you've just read out now from one of the CEOs of the two medical institutions that were visited by the delegation. Firstly, in the process of the Premier finding out and establishing the facts around the outreach by the Israeli embassy officials, we obviously, the first port of call would be the department concerned, the Department of Health, where we asked certain questions, and preliminary answers that came out was that the two CEOs were called or summoned to the Royal Court of His Majesty, where they were under the impression of attending a service delivery related meeting. Upon arrival, they then learned and appreciated that there were in fact foreign dignitaries present in the meeting, and indeed that they were from the Israeli embassy. And indeed, we also learned of this reluctance to embarrass His Majesty, and hence everything else then followed. But we can't operate without, outside of established facts. So what the Premier has done is to request an investigation into what happened. Firstly, how did officials attend that meeting? Secondly, how was access granted to a public institution for a delegation which was unauthorized, unknown by the provincial government? And further, how were gifts or donations received and processed? Because even with that, there's a framework within government that regulates how government departments may receive implements to assist their programs. So we are awaiting the outcome of that investigation. Of course, there are ongoing interactions between the Premier and the national government insofar as coming to clarity around these issues and giving a voice of clarity, if you like, from that level, because there's confusion currently. There can't be an impression of parallel government programs or parallel public
Sure.
programs, for an example. There can't be confusion about the integrity of governance, the integrity of government institutions. The public can't be confused about these basic facts. And when you bypass and you undermine set rules, protocols, convention within a system that seeks to maintain an ordered movement of all the pieces, you are indeed introducing chaos in that context and undermining indeed the sovereignty of the country.
So my understanding again in this, Sonwabo, that these two officials did not want to do it to try and not insult His Majesty, if I stand to be corrected. But in order for this to happen, in order for any donation or any sort of investment that has to happen, and we've just got one more minute, again, it has to go through the Eastern Cape government, which, judging from this comment over here, has not happened. In 1 minute, Sonwabo, what is the outcome that the Premier's office and the Eastern Cape government are hoping for with regards to what we have seen in this last week?
Look, what the Premier has said to me most recently about this issue of these donations. We are not anti-donations. We are not anti-development, and particularly we want to locate this outside completely, out of the debates of Israel, the ICJ versus South Africa, and all of that. That is not our space. Ours, we are concerned only about doing things correctly according to the law. And what the Premier has decided that is that investigation report will then tell us, also including what are these donations, what are they for, are they equipment, are they meant to assist a particular node of our public healthcare system. We will learn all of these facts in this report that I'm saying is also going to be informing decisions that will have to be made at a higher level at national government. But we are not anti-development. So in other words, we're not going to discard of these, but of course they are going to be definitely be sequestered for purposes of conducting this investigation to maintain integrity around that process. And of course, the outcomes will be shared with the public.
Sonwabo Mbananga, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Sonwabo Mbananga. He's the Premier spokesperson for the Eastern Cape province. Just my closing part, we've got 30 seconds left. Of course, there are those, of course, who would sort of look at any development coming from especially Israel, given what we have seen from reports, United Nations, even two Israeli organizations, Physicians for Human Rights and B'Tselem, saying that Israel's conduct is genocide in Gaza. And then, of course, you got the ICJ ruling that said that what Israel is doing in Gaza and the occupied West Bank is tantamount to an apartheid system. Interesting how this is all going to develop. And this comes, of course, as King Dalindyebo made that visit to Israel, which has irked many South Africans with regards to that. After the break, we saw what happened in Addington Primary School. There were marches or protests that were happening through some MK Party supporters, March and Operation Tutula. What does this mean? Because there is a part of the Constitution which allows for undocumented immigrants to have education. First, I'm going to be speaking to the South African Refugee Organizations Forum, and immediately after that, I'll be speaking to Zandile Dabula from Operation Tutula. Do stay tuned to News in Focus.